And welcome to yet another edition of Hunter Gatherers, the podcast of Hunter S. Thompson Stories, broadcasting from historic Prytania St at the Opera Guild House, one of the locations of the upcoming 11th GonzoFest. And joining us from his perch in Washington, D.C. is the host of this program, Mr.
Curtis Robinson. How are you doing, Christopher?
I do very well, Curtis. And we've got a special guest calling in from the wilds of Alaska, if I'm not mistaken, someone you know very well, and Hunter Thompson knew very well. Introduce Kent to our public once more. He's been on the show before.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Ken, how are things in Alaska?
Rainy, cloudy, trying to get spring to come here. And it's failing. So, yeah.
Well, New Orleans is going to be a little bit warmer.
Just a
I'm
little
bringing
bit.
shorts.
Oh, yeah. If not, they'll be provided for you.
So Kent Fielding is if there is one person who is able to organize this entire GonzoFest, this 11th GonzoFest, if one person who has tirelessly worked for the gathering of people that will be in New Orleans between May 15th and May 18th at the historic Rink, it is one Kent Fielding. And Kent, this is a bit like herding cats, except the cats are drunk and on drugs. But other than that, it's been a really interesting process watching you organize Hunter Thompson fans to talk about Hunter for 3 full days.
There's so many people that have worked hard to get this event together. So, I don't want to take credit for it as a single person. It is it's a team effort.
Well, I know, and it's you and Margaret, Harl, and the others have, but you've been putting this thing together now for the better part of a year. And what can we expect coming up at GonzoFest, number 11? We've talked about how it came about, but we haven't really given every little event that's happening in the previous podcast.
Okay, so we have some great beat poets coming, some great poetry, both at the bookstore and at some of the late night venues. There's also some scholars coming and some panels with scholars, including the Daughters of Gonzo. There are some late night events that will be happening, music at various locations, including the Howling Wolf, the Always Lounge, the Library Bar, and Cafe Istanbul.
Now, all of this is available to find out more about it at gonzofest.net, folks. That's gonzofest.net. And the most interesting thing, Curtis Robinson, is that this entire event is the low, low price of free.
Yes. You can't beat the rates on that. I wonder, Ken, some of the things as we've posted the schedule online and as I've shared it with people, the two things that pop back, the questions I get, one of them is how will the after hours things work? And then the other thing from a more literary sense is people asking about the beat influence, and does that mean that GonzoFest that GonzoFest feels like Hunter is part of the beat legacy? I don't know, my response so far has been, well, he's not part of it.
Right. So to answer your first question, so there's each night has a different sort of venue for a late night venue. All the events during the day are at the Garden District Bookshop, but at night you have on Thursday it's the Always Lounge. It's sort of a pre-kickoff event, and then Friday night it's at the Howling Wolf Club from 10 to 2 a.m. and at Robert's Bar from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Saturday night it's at the Library Bar, and then from 10 to 2. And then on Sunday night, it's at the Cafe Istanbul from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And all those late night events are also free. And even the Howling Wolf, which is normally you have to pay a ticket price to get in, but the owner of the Howling Wolf was a Hunters fan, and so he graciously donated the venue to us.
That is incredible. It is a real testament to it. So,
I was confronted by at least one of my New Orleans cronies who pointed out that they find it quite amusing that a Hunter Thompson group would say that 10 p.m. is a late night venue, but So I immediately pushed back and said we are honoring the request of the neighbors of our venue, and
For those
if
for those that don't know,
included-
yeah, the Garden District has a basic curfew of about 10 o'clock at night for live events, and we're doing this in the historic Rink Shopping Center at 2727 Prytania on May 15th through May 18th for the panels, and we had to move the music to a later venue, but we're going to have music, Kent Fielding, at the rink, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken. Yeah, so
Yes. Well, okay. So, a couple questions, a couple of comments. One, so the late night venue, which is at Robert's Bar, the guy who wanted to organize that, guy named Eddie Alonzo, he emailed me asking about doing something. He also does ticketing for promotion for another venue that wanted that Friday night, but when I was talking to him, because I was like, I don't know if we can add anything else, and he's like, 2 a.m. is Hunter's time. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're right. Let's do it at 2 a.m. time, 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. So pretty much the Roberts Bar is really going to be kind of like a gathering for people who want to tell Hunter S. Thompson stories, or have an open mic. I think there's even going to be maybe the Road to Hunter, a film that was done, I think, in 2006. About someone seeking out, or two young journalists seeking out Hunter, and at his funeral in 2005. Going back to the beat question, one of the things I would say about the Hunter S. Thompson and beats is that I think a lot of the beat poets that look at Hunter as a figure to look up to and to be inspired by, or to catch a spark from, is they look at Hunter as this person who stood up to the establishment. And made political statements, and I think that's what as far as the beat connection, I think that's where it is. I mean, most beat poets have this a political statement to their poetry, and I think they see Hunter doing the same thing. Though I would probably say that Hunter did not see himself as a beat, even though there are connections in his work to Allen Ginsberg and the Hells Angels, and I'm sure he considered Allen Ginsberg a friend. So there are some connections, but Hunter, would probably not appreciate being labeled beat, but I do think beats do look at him, or the contemporary beats do look at him as a father figure, as far as like this person who made political statements that they thought that they believe is something that should be respected and honored and continued, particularly in our current climate.
And one of the things that Curtis and I have talked about so often, Kent, is the fact that New Orleans played a much bigger role in Hunter's life than sometimes the fans appreciate. Obviously, the Nixon obituary was written at the Carousel Bar, and we're going to talk about that. It was also the last fling of Hunter S. Thompson. We're going to do a tour on that. But I want to get your perspective, because when a few people heard about that we're having the 11th GonzoFest in New Orleans, they're like, you're a little far away from Louisville or from Aspen. I don't really quite get, why are you having it in New Orleans? And yet, as Curtis has explained, that it was not an unfamiliar environment for Hunter. In fact, it was a place he really loved. Can you talk about that?
Well, it does seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, it was the last place that Hunter visited before his death in 2005. It's been the home to many Super Bowls, which was Hunter's favorite sport, football, and the big thing was we were looking for a place that was excited to actually host it, which the bookstore was, and that's extremely important. It also seemed like after the last GonzoFest, which was the last GonzoFest that Ron was going to do, that to give it some sort of a rebirth, the event needed to go somewhere outside of Louisville before we return it to Louisville, if it ever returns.
Right.
Yeah. So and New Orleans seemed like the perfect place. I mean, also it just builds excitement. I mean, everyone wants to go to New Orleans, so I mean it seemed to make a lot of sense. And there's some people that have contacted me that actually knew Hunter and hosted Hunter in New Orleans. One of them, Ellie Rand, is going to actually be speaking at GonzoFest. She was out in the late '80s at Al Farm helping him as an assistant, and she also was with him in 2005 when he visited New Orleans, and so she has some some interesting stories to tell.
And Curtis, you and I are actually going to be leading a bit of a walking tour because besides being hosted at the Rink, for those that don't know, the Garden District Bookshop is part of a historic building called the Rink. It was originally a skating rink in 1884, and we're going to be actually having events throughout the Rink. The Garden District Bookshop is the center of it, and its bar Epilogue is one of the few bookstores in the Gulf South that has its own bar in it. We were very inspired by Hunter. But also, we're going to have the panels all around it, but we're actually leaving the Garden District for one of the most important events besides the music at night, a bit of a walking tour, and you know this route pretty well because you were on it on the last hurrah of Hunter Thompson a couple weeks before he died. Can you talk about that?
Yes, but certainly I should say that while the Nixon obituary was begun at the Carousel Bar, it was not finished there. He began it there at the hotel and finished it later because I know I will get no fewer than 15 to 20 people saying, he didn't actually write the whole thing there because, that's my life now.
This last walk you took with Hunter, we're going to kind of recreate it. Where are we going to go?
That remains to be seen. We're going to try to get not just that walk, but some of the favorite places. Certainly some of the bars, and so many stories have surfaced. There's the Johnny Knoxville story that surfaced from that weekend. There's, I think the Tucker Carlson story was that weekend. So we're going to try to go to where some of those stories occurred and talk about that. So since we are the podcast of stories, and then I think most notably, I think we've downplayed the part where it may turn into a bar crawl.
I think that's kind of a given.
There are assumptions that can be made.
So, Curtis, this tour, which begins at the Carousel Bar, that's going to be limited to 28 people. We're doing a sign-up sheet on the website that's going to launch very shortly. And there's going to be another tour on the West Bank, isn't there, Kent?
Yeah, there's going to be a tour of Burroughs' home. That's going to be led by Kurt Hemmler. He's a beat scholar, but he has written on Hunter S. Thompson. He actually has this interesting essay in this book that Ron and I are editing on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Essays on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and the essay is about seeing that Hunter was sort of the bookend. Kerouac and Hunter are like bookends of the 60s, or Kerouac's On the Road and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas are the bookends of like the 60 movement. Kerouac being sort of more of a romantic road that sort of kicks off the 60s, and the 60s start off like innocent, and then Hunter's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was the dark endpoint of the 60s. It's a really interesting essay, but he's going to lead a tour to Burroughs' home, and do some readings on that from Burroughs on Hunter and I think Hunter on maybe it's Hunter on Burroughs and he's also has, I don't know. I mean, he has some stuff that he wants to read and have people read. So it's going to be an interesting sort of tour. I guess that's probably going to have to be limited to 28 as well. I'm not sure.
I should know this, but I don't. But is that the same home that is on the road?
Yes, that's the one.
Oh, that's a treat.
That's so for a beat fan. I mean, you don't. Here's the thing: I keep telling people that a couple of people are like, I like Hunter Thompson, which I can't relate to this personally because I'm a little bit of a fanatic. But I like Hunter Thompson, but I'm more of a beat person. This is if you're a follower of Kerouac and all this. This is also a place you want to go for the 11th annual GonzoFest at the historic Rink Shopping Center. A lot of the beat poets laureates are going to be assembled there. We're going to do a lot of poetry reading. And if you could, Kent Fielding is joining us with Curtis Robinson, yours truly, Christopher Tidmore. And Kent, go through some of the panels we're going to have on between the 15th and the 18th at 2727 Prytania. You mentioned the Women of Gonzo, but what are some of the others?
Yeah, let's start. Let's go in order. On Friday night, there is a panel on music and rock and roll in Hunter's, the influence of music and rock and roll in Hunter's work. That is going to be led by William McKean. Actually, it's going to be moderated by John Brick, but you got William McKean, T.R. Johnson, David Amram, and Dan McCarthy are going to be on that panel. Dan McCarthy considers himself a Gonzo musician. He's Canadian, but he lives in New York City right now. Then on Saturday, after all the tours, we do have the Daughters of Gonzo, and that'll be Saturday night. I think that's at 7:10. Then there's going to be a roundtable discussion about Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, and really drawing on this expertise of these contributors to this book that Ron and I have edited. That's going to be with Victoria Elwood, T.R. Johnson, Kurt Himmler, and Ron Whitehead. We might also have a artist that we're going to put into that mix, who's going to talk about Ralph Steadman's influence on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Then on Sunday, there is a panel at 1 o'clock. Hunter, as his friends knew him, which is going to include Curtis Robinson, David Stretfield, Paul Wilcox, who was a neighbor of Hunter's in the 70s, David Amram, Ellie Rand, Christine Ross, who is the daughter of Deborah Fuller, and Margaret Harold. Oh, wow. And it was going to be moderated by Tim Denivi. And we have also that day, on that last day, there is going to be Grant Goodwine is going to create a live Gonzo piece. He's going to paint it between 2:30 and 3.
Excellent.
30, and he might auction it off. There is a reader's theater of a play from Carlos Morton called The Brown Buffalo, which is about Oscar Zeta Casca. It's actually in Oscar's sort of point of view. So it's going to be slightly different than, maybe the other. If you know, Acosta and Hunter sometimes disagreed about things. So you're going to see maybe some of that disagreement, I think, in that play. And then we have, of course, at the bookstore, David Amram's going to end the night with some special. He's going to play with some special guests, some New Orleans jazz musicians, and his son Adam Amram.
And and I got to say, Curtis, that's the thing. Of the so many things that I'm looking forward to about this Gonzo Fest, or otherwise we wouldn't host it. The thing I'm looking forward to is David Amram doesn't really travel, doesn't make appearances, hasn't been to New Orleans in a long time. And this
94.
may be 94. That was the last time. And so the point, that's a pretty important moment. So the point we're getting in all of this is that this is going to be the first time he's traveled, and one of the biggest concerts he's done in a while for this Gonzo Fest. So, I mean, this is kind of a seminal moment, isn't it, Curtis?
Yes, and David Amram has that great story about Hunter. I hope he tells it there so we can record it, but I'll just say that it involves upstate New York and UFOs.
Yep.
That doesn't encourage you to come. Nothing. Well, folks, you can find out more. You can find out more.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Don't find out about the UFOs.
I mean, our only challenge, of course, is seating is at a first come, first served basis. And when the fire marshal says we've got enough people, that's all she wrote. But otherwise, it is free to come. And this is going to be GonzoFest, GonzoFest.net, the 11th GonzoFest. It's not, I kept saying, I knew better than this. You fall into the category, Kent, of saying the 11th, and you realize, no, this thing's been going on since the 90s, because you want to say annual.
Wow.
It's not. It's the 11th GonzoFest that has taken place over, I think it's a 22-year period, 23, something like that. Yeah.
Right. I think if you count the Hunter S. Thompson tribute in 96, it's been going on since 96. Yeah.
So, basically.
I do count that. We had a big discussion about this at the last one, and we should say, Christopher, that we won that discussion. We decided we were going to count it, whether anyone wanted to or not. So it's our podcast. We can do that kind of thing. We're power mad, as it turns out. And also, we should say that I wonder if this is going to be the last Gonzo. You remember that Christopher and I showed up. We were going to do a podcast each day. We were going to do 2 or 3, and I think we ended up with 7.
Right.
We kept doing it back to back. Yeah.
I will say there has been whispers, after hours about the next Gonzo Fest and possible locations. It will not be in Louisville, but there has been whispers. I'm not going to say it's definite, but it does seem like it's there's something in the works. I always say that you got to get this event over first before you start talking about the next one. But there's always those whispers that start happening right before the event kicks off. And one of the things is like Hunter's 90th birthday is in 2027, so it would be important to do something then. So I don't know. I'm not going to say it's the last one.
If anybody
I think if we've learned anything, we will never say that. It's this is a vampire event. It gets up and has another life.
For those that listen to Curtis and Mai's podcast, this Hunter S. Thompson Stories podcast, Hunter Gatherers, that this all started because we basically were being, jackasses. We were looking at Ron Whitehead and we were saying, as he was on our podcast at GonzoFest, and he says, this is the last GonzoFest, this is this. To his credit, said the last one I will do. And we're like, this is not going to be the last GonzoFest and all this. And basically, we came back and said, I'm like, well, I own a bookstore. I got a Rink. And Kent's like, well, I'll do the organizing. Margaret's like, well, I'll do all the work. And suddenly, these Zoom calls start having about organizing a GonzoFest. There was a little interim of going to Dublin in there, but we're not talking about that. So
I will say that Ron stepped back, but he's not absent. He's still around.
Yeah, no one ever believed he would be absent.
he may claim that he's not doing anything, but that's not true.
In fact, and in point of fact, Ron Whitehead is. I'm going to give some very brief opening remarks, welcoming everybody. But basically, he's giving the opening speech for GonzoFest at the Rink. So this is very.
I think speech is a little strong, a little misleading when it comes to him. I think the opening rant. I think the opening rant.
The opening rant.
It's going to be a rant.
I'm giving odds that because I don't think it's possible for Ron Whitehead to have an opening rant without at least cursing the name of Mitch McConnell at some point in it. So I'm giving odds.
Donald Trump. Yeah. I don't know. There's
Trump,
be a few.
Trump's I expect, and Trump's fine. But
Trump's easy. Right?
Yeah, Trump's easy. You'd expect everything. I fully expect, even in Louisiana, a curse against the name of Mitch McConnell shall happen. Because I don't think it's every time I'm with Ron, it is not impossible to get through a conversation without that. So we shall see. Probably with a little John Kennedy thrown in there, just for good measure. So.
Well, as a Kentucky native, I will say that I appreciate Senator McConnell's service.
Well, I think you also might want to hear. He might say something about J.D. Vance taking the idea of hillbilly up. So
yeah, I mean, I was tempted because I tried to Curtis did the panels. I was tempted on I was invited to every Zoom call. I stayed out of it because I was like, no, I don't want to as the host. I don't want to be like anyone thinking I'm pushing the events of anything that's happening. But that was really kind of the idea. What is a hillbilly? What is Hunter's idea of a hillbilly? Right. And does the hillbilly elegy and what we're doing as it's become the national thing, is that playing? I have to tell you, Kent, that was the panel that kept circling through my mind. It's probably too contemporary, but it fits so much of Hunter's identity that was the one thing I wish we had time. We just ran out of time.
I would tell you that one thing that Ron and I have talked about, and I think if we start organizing this after the election, what we have come up with would have been slightly different. I mean, we started organizing this before the election, and I think we had some expectations that didn't happen in an election. So, one thing that Ron and I talked about is Hunter's 72 book is probably the most important book Hunter wrote, and at least right now, and we should be promoting something on it. There's not a lot of things written on that 72 presidential campaign as far as literary criticism. I don't know why we missed that, but that's one of the things that we started talking about. And that's one of the
interesting things about 72 is in the rest of the world, it kind of feels like the Vegas book is just such a bright light that it takes up the space, right? But that living here in DC really does not seem the case. The Hunter fans here are like, did they got some kind of travel book in Nevada? They've got the 72 book tattooed on their forearm.
It's for a political journalist, and that's, of course, basically what Curtis and I have been most of our careers, though we pretend to do other things like political consulting. The fact of the matter is that was our Bible. It doesn't mean the Vegas book isn't huge. I've read it 27 times probably, but the fact of but Hunter as political journalist remains the sine qua non of understanding Hunter Thompson. Just like understanding him as a sports reporter, because in his mind, those were the two same things.
Politics and sports are so similar in terms of structure, in that something's going to happen and you talk about what's going to happen, and then there's a score. There's a score, and then you talk about, well, with the score, what do we say? So it's like it's the disagreement that makes the horse race, right? So it's always the disagreement that makes political prediction such an art.
And you wouldn't have expected this. You wouldn't have expected this in '72, but starting in 2000, and certainly by 2020, there's overtime too.
yes. Now that we have extra innings, and disputed scores, yes, it gets more like sports by the minute now that I think about it. But unfortunately, that sport is the National Football League, and everybody's an Eagles fan.
Folks, this is some of the topics you'll hear. It's I have not been to every GonzoFest like these guys, but if Louisville is any indication, and I think it's going to be, because a lot of the same people are coming down to New Orleans, a lot of people are following, that it is the most esoteric group of genius, brilliant, screwed up, interesting people you will ever accumulate in one room to come to a GonzoFest talking about the man who's the patron saint of all. Please come to a GonzoFest number 11 at the Garden District Bookshops, Bar Epilogue, and at the Rink, 2727 Prytania, and our related locations like the Always Lounge, the Library, Holland Wolf, and others, all available on the website at gonzofest.net. Kent Fielding, Curtis Robinson, it is always a privilege to be with you guys.
Oh, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you in New Orleans.
All right. Folks, we'll see you next week.
Well, the Southern gentleman hit the highway, gave us stories we could share of crooked schemes, shattered dreams of people everywhere. Road of whiskey screams and motel rooms where no one seemed to care. Road of deep, dark, secret places made us feel that we were there.